If your loved one was charged with murder but was out of jail on pretrial release because they claimed self-defense and they had no violent criminal history or no prior convictions at all, would you believe the court system was fair, or would you prefer that they remain behind bars until the trial was over? When you think about your answer, I'm asking you to consider the current legal system in Illinois, not Quadajah Johnson specifically. When people do the most, I do the analysis. Let's go. The Illinois Supreme Court's denial of the state's PLA is a significant win for Quadajah Johnson's defense team on the pretrial detention issue. However, it does not resolve the murder case itself, and it does not mean unrestricted freedom. Yet, folks are out here celebrating. Social media is full of posts saying Quadajah Johnson, aka Holly, is finally free. But here's the question I have for you today. Is pretrial release actually freedom? Because what Quadajah won last week and what some people think she won are two very different things. So we're going to talk about it today. If you've been following the Quadajah Johnson case, then you already know that on June 11th, the Illinois Supreme Court denied the state's petition for leave to appeal, also known as a PLA. That means that the appellate court's decision remains in place, and the appellate court's decision is for Judge Clancy's circuit court to come up with conditions to release Quadajah Johnson from the Cook County Jail as she awaits trial. For Quadajah and her supporters, that's undeniably a legal victory. You can't take that from them. But some of the celebrations online are really getting ahead of the facts. Because while this ruling opens the door to pretrial release, it doesn't address the murder case itself. Not even close. The Illinois Supreme Court did not decide whether Quadajah Johnson is innocent or guilty. And the court didn't acquit her of anything. That's not what they were asked to do. The state wanted the Illinois Supreme Court to look at the case to determine if the appellate court got it wrong when they said Quadajah Johnson should be released from jail while she fights the murder case against her. The murder charges haven't been dismissed, and no court has found that Quadajah Johnson acted in self-defense. What actually happened and what Quadajah supporters are celebrating are two different things. The higher court determined that the state failed to meet its burden for continued pretrial detention under the standards required by Illinois law. Remember, Quadajah has been locked up since early December of last year. This is a detention issue, not a guilt or innocence issue. Those are two completely different lanes. And I already cautioned y'all that the Illinois Supreme Court was unlikely to get involved with this case at the detention phase. I believe I gave it a 15% chance of even being heard. I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade, but this is where a lot of people are getting confused. Pre-trial release is not the same as freedom. When some people hear the word release, they picture someone returning to a normal life. But pretrial release comes with significant restrictions, and right now we don't even know what conditions Judge Clancy's trial court is going to impose. We have, though, talked about possible conditions that could include things like electronic monitoring, curfews, travel restrictions, no contact order, firearm prohibitions, reporting requirements, restrictions on where she can live or go. Hell, it could be all of those things. Again, I'm not saying that these will be imposed. I'm saying nobody knows yet. Judge Clancy's trial court still has to determine the appropriate conditions for her release. But any one of those conditions go against what freedom looks like. So celebrating right now and calling this freedom before we even know the conditions is premature. That's all I'm saying. What stands out to me, though, is that some supporters are acting as if the case is over, and it's not. While Quadajah Johnson is released during pretrial, she and her legal team will be fighting the first-degree murder charges. Those charges are still there. The indictment is still there. The prosecution is still there. And unless there's a plea deal, The murder trial is still coming. And that's the part that should matter to Quadajah Johnson, her legal team, and her supporters. Because at trial, a jury is going to eventually evaluate the evidence and they're going to decide what happened on September 8th of 2025. Nothing presented on social media, not YouTube panels, Facebook groups, none of that stuff's going to matter. A jury is going to decide Quadajah Johnson's fate. Let me put it another way. When someone is released from prison after serving their sentence, that's a moment of genuine freedom. Whether you supported that person or not, their case is over. Their conviction is behind them and their sentence has been completed. Walking out of prison with no trial hanging over your head and no possibility of being sentenced for the same case in the future is when an inmate is finally free. But that's not where Quadajah Johnson's case is today. She's dealing with pretrial release. The word pretrial literally means before the trial has even happened. The criminal case against Quadajah Johnson is still active, and the possibility of conviction still exists. Hell, the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence still exists. So while supporters do have a reason to celebrate the legal victory, if they choose to do so, I think some of the celebrations are premature because they're treating a temporary stage of the process like it's the final outcome. In reality, this release, even if it happens, could only last a few months. The trial, however, could determine the rest of Quadajah Johnson's life. The biggest question in this case has never been whether Quadajah would remain detained before trial. The biggest question was and still is, what will a jury decide when the evidence is presented at trial? If Quadajah Johnson is ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder, the consequences could be life-altering. A murder conviction can carry decades behind bars, up to 99 years in prison. Quadajah could spend the rest of her life incarcerated. Think about that. People are celebrating a possible release before trial while completely overlooking what could happen after trial. The legal battle that matters most hasn't even happened yet. Now, to be fair, Ramika Blackman supporters should be careful too. Just as Quadajah supporters shouldn't assume victory, Ramika supporters shouldn't assume conviction. The criminal justice system requires the state to prove its case. Theoretically, everyone charged with a crime is presumed innocent until or unless proven guilty by a court of law. That's just how the process works, y'all. So no one should be declaring the final outcome today because we simply don't know it yet. My viewpoint is simple. Quadajah Johnson's legal team earned an important procedural victory. It's only fair to acknowledge that. But pretrial release is not the same thing as exoneration. It's not dismissal or a not guilty verdict. And it's certainly not the end of this case. This case is actually closer to the beginning. The biggest chapter of this story is the trial, and it still lies ahead. So while some people are celebrating freedom today, the reality is that Quadajah Johnson's future will ultimately be decided by what happens in a courtroom, not by what's trending on social media. Just ask Quadajah if she feels free once she's out on pretrial release. Her answer might make you blow out those candles, pop those balloons, and clean up all that damn confetti. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who can use this message. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts. Do you think Quadajah Johnson supporters are celebrating prematurely, or are we just a bunch of haters who just sour because the prosecution lost this round? Meet me in the comments. We can continue the conversation there.